Two experienced hikers were exploring off the beaten path in the high Alps when they spotted something brown sticking out of the snow. At first glance, it looked like a piece of discarded leather, but as they got closer, they realized they had stumbled onto a human corpse. Assuming this was a modern mountaineer who had suffered a fatal accident, they called the authorities. The recovery team arrived with a jackhammer, chipping the body out of the glacier. They were so careless, they actually snapped the frozen arm just to force the corpse into a standard wooden coffin. A forensic expert was finally called in to examine the remains, and he immediately noticed something the recovery crew missed. This man has been dead for over 5,300 years. To put his age into perspective, take a look at this Mesopotamian cuneiform tablet. This man was walking through the Alps during the Copper Age, at the exact same time people in the Middle East were inventing the very first forms of human writing. The ice transformed him into what scientists call a wet mummy. Unlike a dried skeleton or a desert mummy, the glacial freezing process naturally preserved his bones, his muscle tissue, and even his internal organs in startling detail. His perfectly intact remains reveal an ancient, unsolved murder. Modern forensics can now act as a time machine, allowing us to reconstruct the final minutes of a life that ended violently 5 millennia ago. This diagram shows his baseline physical condition. He was around 46 years old, relatively short in stature, and heavily inked. He had exactly 61 simple line and cross tattoos clustered around his joints and his lower back. But his medical scans tell a much darker story. Notice how the internal markers highlight his lungs, heart, and jawline. His lungs were entirely blackened from years of inhaling campfire set. His arteries were severely hardened, and his teeth were rotting from advanced decay and gum disease. Researchers even found traces of a tick-borne infection in his system. It remains the oldest confirmed case of Lyme disease ever recorded. His ruined anatomy suggests that survival in 3300 BCE was inherently brutal. Even before he was attacked, he was already suffering from chronic, debilitating pain. The sequence of events leading to his death started with a violent encounter. He suffered a deep, fresh defensive wound slicing across his right hand, evidence of a recent hand-to-hand fight. He survived the encounter, but he was forced to run. Exhausted and bleeding, he fled out of the valley and climbed straight up into the freezing, high-altitude environment of the Alps to lose his pursuers. While he climbed, he was battling agonizing stomach cramps, caused by a severe infestation of whipworm parasites. To fight the pain, he resorted to eating bracken fern, a toxic plant he used as a desperate medical countermeasure to soothe his digestive system. Yet, despite his injuries, he was fully equipped to survive the cold. He carried a sophisticated Stone Age fire starter, hot embers wrapped in fresh maple leaves, carefully stored inside a birch bark container so they would smolder for hours. Look closely at this oxidized green and brown blade. He attempted to repair his gear, including this axe head made of nearly pure copper. Finding a finish and metal tool of this quality from 3300 BCE proves that sophisticated metallurgy and trade networks were active in Europe centuries earlier than archaeologists previously estimated. He possessed incredibly advanced technology and the survival skills to live in the high peaks, but he was physically compromised and completely alone. He thought he had outrun them. He stopped to eat a final meal of dried meat and grain. But his pursuers had followed his trail. This cross-section illustrates exactly what happened next. From behind, an attacker fired a 27mm stone arrowhead. It violently pierced his back, driving deep through his tissue and lodging perfectly between his shoulder blade and his second rib. It was a remarkably lethal shot. The flint completely severed a major artery. As the diagram updates, you can see the immediate physiological response: massive internal bleeding. His blood pressure dropped to near zero, and he lost consciousness in a matter of minutes. He bled out and died right there where he collapsed in the freezing snow, his journey permanently halted. Ancient Egyptian mummies were the result of highly intentional ritualistic burials. This body was preserved because of a sudden murder. Because he was killed and left to the elements, he provides a historically perfect, unedited snapshot of a life cut short. Shortly after he fell, brutal winter storms buried his body. The extreme cold sealed him inside a deep layer of blue glacial ice, locking his physical form in place, while 5,000 years of empires rose and fell overhead. If you look at this sterile, high-tech forensic lab setup, you can see what it takes to protect him today. He now rests in a highly specialized cooling chamber in Italy, carefully maintained at exactly -6 degrees Celsius. The maintenance is relentless. To keep his ancient skin from drying out and crumbling into dust, scientists must constantly spray his body with sterile water every 2 months. It is an incredible irony. Nature created the world's most perfect accidental mummy, that keeping him intact now requires a continuous feat of modern technological intervention. For decades, scientists assumed his survival was a one-off miracle, a single climate shift that flash froze him permanently. This cyclical timeline graph maps out the actual glaciology over the last 5 millennia. The ice surrounding his body didn't stay solid. It melted and refroze multiple times over thousands of years. Now look at this wide view of a modern alpine glacier. Driven by shifting global climates, these massive ice fields are rapidly retreating, exposing rock and earth that hasn't seen the sun in thousands of years. If he survived those historical melt cycles, he is likely not the only one. As the ice recedes, it is almost certainly hiding a whole new chapter of ancient, murdered, and lost humans waiting to be uncovered.